and let everybody know we are recording.
Okay, good evening, everyone. You have, I'm glad you have joined this meeting. This is the second of a series of, we don't know how many, but it is a continuing series of mini town halls. We'll try to make this as quick as we possibly can, although we would like to make sure that you do understand what we're presenting. This town hall is every Monday, as everyone knows. We are doing this in order to, for anyone who wasn't here before, we're doing this in order to provide more information on the Aliso Canyon gas blowout disaster and health research study. This is the CAG, the Community Advisory Group, and our interest is in making sure that we do everything we can to ensure that everybody that wants to know or should know is given the information that we have learned and performed over the last few months and years, because we are now in the 6th year. So we want you to know the truth, and we want to make sure that if you are involved, that you understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and to let you know that if you live in this area, you should be pretty concerned over whether or not there is a health risk to the residents in this area. We're going to, as you can see, we're going to do various topics on various subjects, and we're going to also provide information on actions that we may need to take, and we'd also like to get your involvement and your understanding and what you'd like to see done if you have ideas. And if you want, you can certainly go to our website. There's much more information there, and I would recommend that you go to that website. We will be having Q&A at the end of this, and hopefully we'll get there sooner than later. So let's go on. This series, this is session 2. Our objectives, as you can see, if you have video, is to review the Scientific Oversight Committee and its roles. We want to touch on and possibly give an appropriate amount of information on the difference between a patient-oriented study and environmental assessment. They are different indeed. And as I said, we'll be taking questions at the end of this. The agenda for this meeting is the SOC's purpose, history, as best we can provide it in a short period of time. And we're gonna try to give you as much information about the SOC as we possibly can. The SOC's actions to date, whether there's one or two or many or none, we're going to give you a little more information on the unilateral decisions that DPH is making. We're going to address the SOC's function in terms of, is it going to be effective? Is it not? What is their position? How are they going to move forward? And we're going to discuss a little bit about what kind of a study should we be accomplishing. Can we go on there, Craig? Last meeting, we showed you this screen. Anyone that wasn't on that meeting can see it here. This is basically to let you know that the CAG itself, over the last year and a half, has had a lot of difficulty trying to make sure that we agree that the health study is going to be effective. And since then, since October, we've taken 3 votes, basically asking the question, do we believe that this study is on the right track? And as you can see by this, that in October and November and February, almost unanimously no. We have voted in no confidence in this study to date. And I think that's important that everybody keep in mind, because we are the ones who are trying to identify whether or not the study is going to have an effective output. And going on, the SOC purpose. This is per DPH, that's the Department of Public Health. And I will keep identifying some of these anagrams from time to time because I'm not sure whether there's anybody that doesn't know them. The SOC is supposed to provide guidance to identify the priorities and goals that are to be used in identifying a research study. The SOC is also supposed to review the plans that are eventually produced and evaluate the progress as they go along. And then after the majority of the work is done, the SOC will be providing advice as to where to go from here and what happens with regards to both public health and the researchers in general. You can see that there's sources. If you get a copy of this, you'll see that at the bottom of these slides, there are sources for you to look at and get more information. And the CAG has felt that the SOC, when we first started out, we felt that the SOC needed to know certain things. We felt that the SOC needed to know what happened. And there was no reason to believe that they knew that or could know it on their own. And so we wanted to make sure that they were given information about the blowout as much as we knew. And we had planned a bus tour to be for the CAG and the SOC members to go along and see what was going on, understand as much as we could with regards to the blowout. Then DPH was also, and by the way, that was canceled. That was due to COVID. We all understood that, but unfortunately, we did not get that far. We would love to have done that. And to date, the communication between the SOC and the CAG has been very weak. When I say very weak, we do not have joint meetings, and there are some of us that believe that that should be happening. I think most of us believe that. But DPH wanted to substitute the ride-along bus tour with a video, and we agreed with that, and we wanted that to happen. But as you can see by the bullet points here, that was more than 9 months ago. There was a subcommittee that was produced, was formed, and they were assisting in trying to develop that video. Then DPH refused to show the CAG the 2 drafts that were produced. We still haven't seen them. And DPH has not completed, or at least we don't believe that they've completed that video. And then DPH unilaterally recently terminated the CAG subcommittees. So there is no action going on, to the best of our knowledge, on that level at this time. Can we move forward? Now, the CAG has recognized for almost the entire time that there are certain things that need to be done. And we originally wanted to collaborate a lot with the SOC, and that was pretty much shut down by DPH's desire to keep them a little bit more separated from us. So we had a liaison back and forth, but it was only one person, and the communication never got developed, at least not to this point. And we would love to have a better communication, better ties with them, but that is not at the moment on the table. Now, the data that the SOC should be using, in our opinion, is data that is obtainable by DPH if they choose to do so. And one of the things that we have been discussing quite a bit, we've taken action to try to put a little pressure on DPH to use their subpoena power, which they do have. And I know that they will say they don't, but they do have subpoena power, and we would love to have them use that subpoena power. And it is necessary for them to use that subpoena power if we're ever going to get a chemical list, which is the substances that were spewed over this valley for 111 days. So we don't have the chemical list. We need the chemical list. We don't have the gas composition. We know that there's 181 bins of dirt and products that were produced at the well when it blew out, and it was stored, and this was stored for, most of it was stored now for 5 years. They've been trying to get rid of the last 150 bins. They got rid of 31 bins early on, and we know that those bins have information in there that is scientifically necessary to understand what happened, what was actually blown out of that well. There is a need for CBC data to be analyzed. That has not come to pass yet. There's a cancer registry database and analysis that needs to be brought forward. There is water, soil, vegetation, radiation analysis from our neighborhoods that has never been done. And all of our homes have been bombarded in the valley. You know, I would say that almost everybody has it, but predominantly in the North Valley. We all know that, we all believe that. But still, there hasn't been any substantial testing of the neighborhoods. And that needs to be done. If there's going to be any at all, if it's going to be done at all, it needs to be done as soon as possible. And then there is a need for a scientifically valid air monitoring process. And that there is a slide a little bit later on discussing that from CCST, which is the California Council on Science and Technology. So we need to know what these bullet points here are presenting. We need to have this information. The Scientific Oversight Committee needs this information. The researchers that will do the research, the health study, need to know this. If there is a doctor who is treating patients, they need to know this information, some of this information. So this is a big concern for us, and it should be a big concern to everyone. Shall we move forward? The SOC history to date is one that there isn't a lot of information that we have, and honestly, we'd like to have a lot more knowledge of what they're doing. And I think in a little bit, Dr. Nordella, I hope, will enlighten us on a few of the few points here with regards to the SOC. The history to date, there is a consent decree. And one of the big things in this was, in that consent decree, there was a requirement for 7 agencies and 1 academic member to be on the SOC. Those agencies are listed here. You can read those off yourself, but they're the California Air Resources Board, Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, Los Angeles Department of Public Health. Now, there's an interesting thing about that, is that they are not required to be a part of this. The California, where am I? The United States Environmental Protection, the EPA, and California EPA, and the South Coast Air Quality Management, all were given the right to have a representative on the SOC. They also had a position for an academic, but that has not been achieved to the best of my knowledge, the best of our knowledge. Shall we move on?
Yeah, Brian Craig here. We do believe there's an academic
okay.
as part of the SOC.
It has, but I don't believe we've been introduced to that, have we?
That is an accurate statement. We haven't been told
Okay.
that this person is the required one to fill the role, which,
Yeah, so
it's a subtle point that we should get clarified.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's a point of transparency, and I'm afraid that I have to be very honest when I say that transparency is not there. That's what all of this is leading up to in a big way. And additionally, there are members that are on this SOC that are independent. The reason they are there is because the SOC was very instrumental in reaching out to people and making sure that there were 8 independent members in order to compensate for the agency members, which we felt was a little bit of a skew that was not completely dependable. You know, an agency of the government may or may not be fully dependable in making judgments on behalf of the community. And we didn't want to take the chance. It's my words. And we wanted 8 independent members, and we fought for that. We fought for a long time, many months, and we did accomplish that. We also were able to specifically get Dr. Nordella on that CAG. And that was not the easiest thing because he was originally rejected. And for whatever reason, the Department of Public Health did not want to seat Dr. Nordella on that SOC. However, he was on the SOC, and I say was because you'll hear in a little bit. Moving on. And I'm taking this as fast as I can because I'd like to get to the ability for anyone who is here to discuss this. The recent DPH actions have been questionable, and the health study, I'll try to get my thought together for a second, sorry. There's a lot of question as to what the guidance from DPH is to the SOC. We don't see much, but we're not the SOC. And again, Dr. Nordella will fill us in, I think, in a little bit on that. The current actions of DPH have been to reduce involvement by the CAG and the SOC. And one of the ways they've done that is they have established a charter for the SOC. We've asked the question, what's in it and why they've done it, and is it harmful or is it beneficial to the community? Is it normal? Is it unusual? We have gotten a lot of comments back from members of the SOC, and we have looked at it ourselves. We've read the agreement, and for the most part, what it does is it makes it impossible for members of the SOC to continue to utilize the information that they have in non-CAG health study environments. So what I mean is they've gagged them, and if they want to be involved in some other health study with regards to issues from the CAG, from the LISO, then it would be difficult for them to use that information unless DPH had agreed to it. So it basically harms the community, in my opinion, if the SOC members can't be able to communicate openly with the public if they need to in order to get more information. So there's questions about how appropriate the charter is that the DPH has presented. And then they've got membership changes. Along with everything else, they have had at least one resignation of an independent scientist. They are in the process, if they haven't already done so, of terminating Dr. Nordella, and he can again address that. And there are other members, or at least one other member, that may also leave the SOC due to this charter. So it's very important that we understand and try to ensure that a very independent, transparent SOC exists. And at this moment, that's kind of on the firing block and firing line, and we don't know what's going to happen at this stage, but we certainly have some information, and it's not good information with regards to the membership of the SOC.
Brian, can we take this opportunity to bring in Dr. Nordella, who
I was just gonna say, we are now at a point where we should ask Dr. Nordella to, you want to move to the next slide, please? We have a, before we go to Dr. Nordella, we should make it clear that the SOC is going to be addressing a lot of things, and unless the SOC is independent, there's no guarantee that we're going to get a solid output that we can depend on. As everyone knows that's been involved with this for a long time, there's a lot of mistrust with regards to how DPH handles this. We know that there are the changes that we've seen now with regards to the DPH removing the subcommittees, limiting the CAG to a quarterly meeting basis, and the failure to allow the CAG and the SOC to communicate really leaves us with a question of, is this going to happen or is it not? And what's going to happen with the SOC in the future? How are they going to be limited, or are they going to be limited? And these are big questions that we have to address. So let's move on and see if we can get Dr. Nordella to give us a little information about where he's seen with the SOC.
Okay, try and be to the point. It's my opinion, and this is my opinion, is sitting on this from the beginning, is that there was no charter in place, and I'll just try and discuss the facts. No charter in place at the very beginning. They tried to have a vote on a subject matter. It was a little embarrassing because when they said, well, how's the voting work? We're like, we have no charter. So the charter was not addressed until months later. And it was only addressed on a very superficial level of who's going to be chair, who's going to be co-chair. So the charter became an issue after an invitation by the Porter Ranch Neighborhood Council to myself to present a town hall on the progress of the SOC. So sitting through these meetings for approximately a year, to the best of my knowledge, right now we have kind of a piece of paper with a lot of ideas on it. And the ideas kind of go from A to Z on what we want to look at, or what they want to look at, or what they can look at, always keeping in mind that they have $25 million. And that's a rate limiting factor. So that's where, and I won't go into the termination yet. So that's where we're at, or they're at now. I will give you my opinion. This is not a committee. This is not a scientific oversight committee. This is a group of individuals that are either employed or contracted with the Department of Public Health, known as the Aliso Canyon Disaster Health Study. This is the core group that is actually deciding what the study is. Yes, I think they're reaching out to some of the scientists, but I think it would be better if we called it a scientific advisory group like the CAG. So I think that's very important that everybody understands that. So they are taking these ideas back to the table, and they will be formulating this request for proposal, of which will go out to different researchers. So again, I think that it's a misnomer. When I signed up for this, I thought we would be definitely inputting upon where this is going. Now, there's kind of two ideas and a lot of smaller ideas. And the two ideas, just to explain to you, is one is a patient-based study that will look at the patient. This is what you've called for. This is what you asked me to represent you for, is to go in and say, what is going to address the issue of, am I sick or will I be sick because of this exposure? So mine has always been, as a physician, as an MD and a clinician, has always been a patient-centric study. They are going to be thinking more along an environmental study, of which Dr. Simon had numerous times in my personal conversations has talked and said the Department of Public Health is not good at environmental study evaluations. So what an environmental study is, what they'll do is they'll look to this information that they already have and have over the last X amount of years, and they'll give you a health risk calculation, which will tell you that you have 3% of developing multiple myeloma. And I'm just making that up. That's obviously not what they're saying. So they'll be sending this out to get an independent researcher, such as a UCLA or UC Irvine or someone like that, then to come back. And that, I don't think, is what you really want. That's not what I would recommend as a physician. I think you have to look at incidence of disease, such as even incidence of cancer. And is these chemicals have any form of causation? It is a bit tricky, but it certainly can be done. So this is where the SOC is now, and I don't know if you want me to address anything else. I don't want to dominate this, so please let me know if there's any other question that you have or you would like me to talk about.
Brian, if I may, Doctor, we've talked a lot about the inability to even do a proper risk assessment because of the bad data, the air quality data. And I wanted to share with the community. I think you've seen this before, and if you're comfortable with it, you want to present it. If not, I'm happy to. But this was the CCST's evaluation of the air data.
Yeah, I think you can just read it and I think it's fine. But yes, this is definitely a concern. It's a flagship organizations that is looking at this and telling you why a environmental study would not be a thing that you really want to do to look at the risk of the patients. But please go ahead.
Yeah, I really believe it just amplifies it, and it helps. I think it helps the community connect the dots, and that it's not, there's multiple science-based folk that have this position. And it's basically helping us understand that the air monitoring done around the time of the blowout was not done properly, including like this third bullet point, which just offends me personally. The limits of the device in which to capture an air sample were set way above what is an unhealthy level. So, right, so it could have been at 20, the benzene could have been, trigger was at 20, and it's only supposed to be 1. So it could have been 10 all day long, 10 times higher than what it's supposed to be, and the monitor never captured it. So the CCST, the punchline that I would like for the community to understand is this last phrase at the bottom that says, it's not reliable or sensitive enough because of the low detection limits to provide proper monitoring for a health study. The other thing I just want to do really quickly here, because we're going to get into the chemical list next time. This is CCST that did it shortly after the blowout. Their number one requirement of moving forward is get the composition of the gas, the chemical list. This was their first recommendation. And this is an independent science body that is contracted out by Sacramento.
So
Brian,
according to Dr. Paul Simon, you will never get the chemicals of concern. So I think that's important. I also think it's important what the public should know is that when we first had our meeting, I think there was a gross, I don't want to call it what it is, but I unfortunately I have to. It was a lie that public health actually put out to the SOC and basically said all of the chemical measurements that they had reported were all within normal limits. And by AQMD, that is not true. Their evaluation of monitors. And then they go back and they look at the US EPA, even though we have California EPA here and the numbers are 1,000-fold less. They use the US EPA because it gives them a very large threshold. So I don't know if you want me to address the termination. I'm more than happy to, or we can hold and to Q&A.
Well, let's move that to Q&A. Brian, why don't you take it back and if you don't mind, and finish it off.
Yeah, we certainly can answer questions about termination later, and we can move forward from there. So in trying to conclude this, obviously there is an environmental risk assessment and there is patient-centric, and Greg, if you want to address this slide and the next slide, I'd appreciate it.
Oh, sure, yeah. So,
more familiar to you.
Thanks, happy to help, Brian. So really quickly, what we want to convey here to the community is we have been down this path before. DPH has played this playbook before. Back in February of 18, they published a study on the risks of living near gas and oil facilities in LA County. And their own study basically outlines why it can't be conclusive. And that's because there's flaws in epidemiology methodologies. There's lack of accurate ongoing environmental exposure data. Does that sound familiar? They don't have good data. And they basically just admit that you can't come to a conclusion. And here's their summary. This is verbatim from their study. Epidemiology studies are not able to conclude whether or not living near gas and oil activities is associated with long-term health effects, but rather highlight the need for further research. So this appears to be the path that they are on. Everything is pointing to a risk assessment is not going to answer the questions that this community has. Am I just as safe living near a LISO and experiencing the blowout as somebody that was far away? And we have been telling everybody that'll listen, the community should, and justifiably, we think they'll be outraged if $25 million is spent and they come back and say, we need to research this further. So really, that's the punchline. And then finally, Brian, you want to take this home with that last sentence there? It's all yours.
Are you talking about this? Well, you can see the conclusion screen and the issues that have been brought forward tonight. The fact that the studies that are being proposed are limited and limiting. We don't have any faith in the quality of the information that is available at this point. And that was pointed out by Dr. Nordella and Craig with regards to the CCST. And the chemical list is so important. And we're just not able to understand how we could have an accurate and meaningful health study if we don't have a chemical list and we don't do a patient-centric study. So we're very concerned. We hope you're just as concerned. And obviously, we would love to have your input and your thoughts on this. And as you want to go back to that last statement, Craig? And so you read what's in bold. Therefore, the Aliso Canyon Disaster Health Study must demand the chemical list and focus on the evaluation of the health of the people. And we've been trying to make that statement clear to everyone and the importance of that statement. We must do a patient-centric study. If we don't do that, the results cannot, in my opinion, and I think in the CAG's opinion, cannot be considered thorough and maybe even valuable. So I think that's what we want to get out of this, and we want to understand why the Scientific Oversight Committee is not being given the tools to do their job. Continue, Craig. So now let's answer your questions. Hopefully we have the answers, but please raise your hand or chime in as you would like. We would like to hear whatever you have to say. And I can see that Bruce is, I believe this is Bruce Hector, Dr. Bruce Hector.
Yes, it is. Aloha.
Hi.
My question to Dr. Nordella is, has he kind of taken a poll of other SOC members to determine their preference for the type of study, i.e. patient-centered or environmental assessment? And are all of the SOC members aware of the community's preference? Thank you.
Yeah, I would say, Bruce, that they are aware of the patient-centric study. In fact, one of the regulators had made a comment about, he kind of jumped the gun a little bit in a meeting and stated that, when should we allow the community, or when should we inform the community that we can't live up to their wants and needs? And it was like, well, wow, it just seemed to be pretty quick to pull that trigger. So I think all of them, you have to understand too, is that the other regulators, this was from a regulator, there was only 2 regulators that I can recall ever having input. The others were pretty silent. I think that you have the independents, one party only had given their opinion that it needed to be a patient-centric study. The others were pretty neutral on it. So, and we were not encouraged until about a half a year through that we should have the emails of other members on the committee. So initially there was no communication. There became communication later, and I established a relationship with one of the parties on the committee, which also, by the way, did not sign. And I do not know where his status is of being relieved of his duty, let's just say, from the committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Is Julie Corstein? Please unmute.
Okay. Each time I listen to all of you, it's just more frustration. It's been going on way too long. When the original, was this a consent decree? Give me the legal termination of how this, what is it called?
Julie, that is correct. The health study was outlined in the consent decree. For anybody who has a copy of the PDF, I think it's page 97, and it outlines how much money was to be allocated and some of the structure as we've shared tonight, i.e. the groups that are required to participate, that the county is the administrator, etc.
Okay. Was there ever written in the consent decree a timeline?
I do not believe so.
There is a 3-year, and then depending on where we are at that point, it can go on. But everyone should keep in mind, though, that the amount of money attached to this of $25 million, I don't want to make this sound like it's even worse, but honestly speaking, there is a CAG, there is a SOC member who informed us that this study should have been started at, as he put it, they should have put an extra 0 on this. So the 25 million has to be spent well in order to accomplish anything.
I understand the 25 million is way less than is necessary to do an appropriate study. But did you say that the consent decree was for 3 years? At the end of 3 years, whatever was going to happen.
So,
would be-
Julie, Brian, I'll jump in so I can clarify, since I took your initial question as, is there a time frame to get started? And in that respect, there is not. However, as Brian was enumerating, there is a initial 3-year period of the study which will be conducted, at which time the Scientific Oversight Committee will evaluate the study and make a determination whether it should continue on for upwards of another 7 years, for a total of 10 years.
Oh. I was wondering what the conclusion was, and if there, with LA Unified, obviously there were consent decrees, but there was a timeline, and so I was wondering for this. It blows my mind because I don't see how anything is going to get done because it doesn't seem to be happening. I don't know.
I think our estimation is there won't be any real start to this. I mean, we don't even have a goals and procedures document, which is step 1, and it's the middle of February. It's supposed to be out sometime in February. There's at least a 30-day comment period on that. That puts us, let's say, end of March. The RFP hasn't gone out, and I don't recall if they've defined how long they will wait for the RFP, but I would imagine it will be somewhere between another 90 and 180 days. So you're not talking about them really getting started, I would say, until early 2022 at the earliest. It's kind of, I think, if anyone else in the CAG disagrees, I think that's kind of the timing they've shared with us.
I guess if they wait long enough, no one will remember anymore. mean, it's crazy. That's all. Thank you.
Hey, Julie. Brandy,
Good evening. Dr. Nordella, I'm curious, considering, as was just mentioned, that an adequate health study should have had 10x the amount of money, did you ever get any sense from the other SOC members that maybe they felt like their hands were tied behind their back, or they were trying to figure out how to do this monumental thing with limited resources? Was that something that may be interfering with progress at all?
It was certainly discussed during some meetings about the funds. And, you know, my issue was always like, okay, so let's not think like 3 years or 7 years or whatever down the line. Let's just start the process. And if we could start the process and put it on a good vector, like, you know, looking at the patients, seeing, examining the patients, looking at, I call it organ system study, to see if there's any damage and how we could see if there was some form of causation from the exposure. And then we would worry about that, coming up with the initial data. You're already at 5 to 6 years.
Right.
You're already almost defining long-term. So the question is, again, is that, do we have any data there that makes us very concerned that then we would want to potentially look for funds elsewhere? So that was always my thought process. And I think it was kind of it's a failure to think so far down the line and how you're going to spread the $25 million out. I think it takes away from the front end of the study.
I see. Thank you.
thank you, Brandy. Mary,
I think that it's just, as a CAG member, it's really important for the community to realize that it's difficult to do any kind of study, let alone a patient-centric one, when you don't have basic foundational information. So you all know this, but CAG has been really working, and we've hit a wall, almost a no, every time with the chemical list and others. So, and we've asked, use the Gulf study, use other oil and gas studies as a foundation, but none of us know everything that we were exposed to. So, Dr. Nordella says this often, it's like going to a doctor and well, what actually are you experiencing? And you don't have any information as to what you were exposed to. It's beyond frustrating as a community member that DPH has subpoena power for this. We have mentioned this to almost all of the local, legislators. And we've, as CAG, have received a pat on the head. Oh, you're right. We need to get that information. And now it's months and months later, and we're not getting that information. So should you as community members be outraged? Yes, you should, because your DPH is pursuing a health study course that absolutely doesn't have any foundation as to what we've been exposed to regarding it. So it is of grave concern.
thank you, Mary. I would like, if there's anyone else that has any questions or thoughts, comments, we'd like to hear them. I would like to also, since there isn't anybody at the moment, I'd like to ask everyone to consider, I actually like to ask you to all attend Dr. Nordella's town hall. And let me ask him to, Doctor, would you give us a little insight into your town hall that's coming up?
Well, as a matter of priority, I just think COVID is very confusing to most, if not all. The facts of the matter, how the virus functions, risk factors, so forth and so on. And it's a special issue with this community, which was discussed at SOC meetings when we brought up the fact that the CBC probes show that there was issues potentially, again, this is not a sky's fall, it's a probe, that potentially you have issues with lymphocytes, which is basically where your antibodies, your B cell, T cells are. So I think that, again, putting this out to the community, I'm going to try and go through and then take an hour of Q&A so people can ask their questions. And then I would like to follow it with a town hall on the exact issues of the SOC, the behavior of DPH over time. And, you know, again, I think it's time to get this out to the people.
Thank you, Doctor.
And Brian, I will share the details for that Zoom town hall are in the chat.
And if anybody wants any further information, please let us know. Is there anything else, Craig or Andrew or Mary?
I have
If-
one more question about Dr. Nordella's. Is there some way to put it on like the Porter Ranch Neighborhood Council or whatever so that I can click right into it, you know, rather than just writing it down right now? Is there, how can we get the information online?
I don't know if it will be online, but we're trying to make it available. I just contacted all of the neighborhood councils this morning, so it should be there for you. And hopefully, as you see the Zoom meeting, you just click on that and you'll
Yeah.
go right into the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Mhm.
You're welcome.
Craig, Andrew, do you think we could put that on our website and direct people to our website?
I don't see why not.
I think that would be a good idea.
We've got some members from other, from NCs here, so if they want to chime in on how they want to make the communities aware of that, that would be great. Okay, was tonight helpful? Are people getting more of a sense of what has happened or oftentimes hasn't happened?
I know our presentations have been somewhat frustrating. They would be to me if I was just sitting listening to them. It is difficult to understand as human nature why an organization called Department of Public Health isn't more aggressive on this issue. But we have to remember that it is governmental and it is up to us, the community, the people, to push this forward and make something happen. So I'm hoping that everyone takes this information, realizes that it's not necessarily all good, and that there is a group of us that want to make this happen and gets behind us. And we're hoping that everyone will do so. And Brandy, yes, you have a question?
Not as much as of a question, I just wanted to say thank you to everybody because, look, it isn't easy to dive into these kind of details and act as both advocates and watchdogs. And I just am thankful that all of you care enough to be doing this work and to be spending the time. So, you know, thank you for doing the best you can for our community. That's what I want to say.
Thank you, Brandy. And I want to thank everyone for showing up and being interested in this. And I hope you will attend our next session, which will be on the 22nd. It'll be our third, and we will be addressing the chemical list, the cancer registry, and I think this, the CBC study, I think this will be a bit more interesting than the path of the SOC at the moment, but hope to see you then.
And don't forget, this video and the slides will be available on our website, alisohealthstudycag.org. And you can always email us with anything you need at members@alisohealthstudycag.org.
Thank you very much. We will conclude this unless there's any other questions. Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Dr. Nordella.